So walk me through the framework. You talked about the 139 framework, right? So I think it's a right time for us to talk about it, and especially if I'm somebody in a company, if I want to start the the deliberate practice of learning to storytell. So what is this 139 framework, and walk us through it?
Sure, happy to. So let me kind of take a step back on that. You might have heard me use a framework quite a bit now. I'm a bit of a nerd for frameworks, and there's a reason for it. I feel that a framework is a handy tool for solving a problem in a tried and tested way. It's no framework is perfect. That there's a famous saying, right? All models are wrong, but some are useful. So all frameworks are imperfect or wrong, but some are useful. So you have to kind of take it with that. And so I have on some of mine, I can share this with you, a framework of frameworks, because at the end of the day, 139 is one small framework that sits within a larger framework. So that's one way to
No,
kind
in
of
fact,
broadly look at it.
I agree with you on that, Ravi. I think the way I see frameworks is it allows you to actually. It's almost like a small pigeonhole of concept that you can keep it there, and you can pull it out, and you can actually, and therefore you got lots of pigeonholes, and you basically each is a framework, but you need to pull it out as and when that is needed, and that's really how I see frameworks.
Well said. Yeah, and that skill comes with which framework to use in which situation is a skill which comes with practice, and that's why it's the art part of storytelling. Um, so 139 for me is a way to build your story narrative, right? So let me tell you where that build the story narrative comes within a story, and I think it might be useful to talk about the ABCD process, or again framework, for want of a better word. Because that's where it's easy. So any storyteller broadly is going through these four steps, right? A is align with your audience. Who are you going to present to? What is their seniority? What is their background? What do they already know about the topic? What are their objectives from that session? What are their fears and worries and concerns? So as much as possible, if you can research your audience and know about their background, becomes easier for you to tailor and customize your story, right? So aligning with them, aligning with the I call them aligning with the audience, the data, the metrics, everything. The B is building the story narrative, right? So once you know your audience, don't start on a PowerPoint slide directly, right? So the PowerPoint will come later. On paper or Word document, write down your story in sentences, and sentences as in messages, not in terms of saying, I will talk to them about the project need, then I will talk about the key findings, and then the implications and the next steps. That is not a story. That is a list of agenda items, right? So instead, if I were to kind of take an example of a review, right, a quarterly review. So an agenda for a review would be revenue review, a cost, profitability, next steps. Tells me nothing, right? Instead, our revenue grew by 12% higher than target, mainly driven by South region and the new pricing strategy. That is one whole big sentence. On the cost side, we managed to rein in employee cost um, and materials, thereby pushing up EBITDA by 30 bps. Final, the next steps. We therefore need to continue this momentum, but address some concerns in Division A. Right. So now these three are my broad three messages that I want to give in that year. And those three will then get a one line summary, which is that, revenue broadly doing good, EBITDA improving, but concern on Division A. And then within revenue, that one line, it will further get divided. That, overall revenue grew by too much. And in South, what really drove the growth? In pricing strategy, what really happened? Then cost again, you go into employee, what happened in material, what happened, and so on. And then similarly on the this, and then each of those can then further, as you can imagine, drill down further, right? So you're building out the story like this. It will, if you know your data, it will not take you more than half an hour to do this, but that half an hour will give you so much clarity and then your presentation preparation becomes easier, far easier. So this building the story narrative is a crucial, I would say 70% of your success rests on how well you do this. It should be so good that even if you don't have your slides, you're standing in an elevator with your audience, you should be able to tell that story, right? So majority of my coaching and training time also goes into the story narrative piece. And So in the narrative, the 139 framework comes, and I kind of give you a rough example of that, right? So you kind of have 3 lines and then a one line summary and then further. There are other elements to narrative also, like adding elements of surprise, adding personal stories, adding analogies, and so on. So that to me is more making it interesting, not just clear. So the 139 is a tool for clarity. These are tools for engagement. So that's broadly on the build a story narrative, the B part. C is choosing the right visuals and the slide, because we are visual creatures, we understand visuals better. And D is for delivering with impact. So there are some techniques around that also. So broadly, can remember ABCD. Audience, build a story narrative, choose the right charts and visuals, and deliver with impact, and spend the most time on the narrative piece.
Very nice, very nice. So it almost when you were explaining it and talking to me about the key messages, often when I see PowerPoint presentations, you start with the agenda. Okay, imagine that you were to completely unbox and actually say, what is the story one that I'm going to talk about, what is the story two I'm going to talk about, and then it becomes the agenda for the presentation. So it almost is, you are almost saying that don't start with agenda, start with the story and then go to the agenda, because agenda stories give you an agenda, agenda cannot give you a story,
So
you
yeah, I
know.
mean, almost is what I would agree. So I sometimes I say it's okay to have an agenda slide in addition to the story slide. I call it the exec summary slide, which is in one slide you're summarizing all the messages, all the findings, the recommendation, everything from that for that presentation, right? And in doing so, the framework that works best is 139. And I'm happy to share a
No, no,
post on that in the show notes.
yeah, and more importantly, I think the way I am seeing it is, of course, you will have the agenda, but as you're building it, you are actually thinking about the story rather than in this agenda, what story am I going to say? I
Very
think
much.
that's the most important,
Yeah.
takeaway that I have for that. Okay, so that's a very nice way of actually building. So imagine